Just keep smiling, Lena. It's not like she can complain about the service. The voice was a low, venomous whisper, slick with the kind of cruelty that thrives in polite spaces. Mr. Fletcher, the manager of the Ethelred Hotel, stood with a smile so wide and artificial it looked like it might crack his face. His eyes, however, were cold as they flicked between the young concierge, Lena, and the woman standing before them at the check-in desk. The woman was Vivian Crestwell. Her name was a headline, a brand, a force of nature in the tech world. In person, she was an island of stillness in the vast, sterile lobby. Dressed in a sharply tailored charcoal coat, with her dark hair pulled back into a severe but elegant knot, she possessed a coiled intensity that made the air around her feel thin. She was also deaf and mute. Fletcher adjusted his tie, his gaze still fixed on the powerful CEO. "All that money and she can't even say hello," he murmured again, this time with a soft, dismissive chuckle meant only for Lena. "What a waste. Just make sure she doesn't break anything." Lena's own smile was frozen in place, a fragile shield against her manager's ugliness. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the marble countertop. This was beyond poor service. It was a violation. Her eyes darted towards Miss Crestwell, who stood with an unreadable expression, her sharp gaze taking in every detail of the room, every flicker of movement, every forced smile. She couldn't hear the words, but a woman like that could read contempt in the air. Lena's stomach churned. Appalled, she shifted her weight slightly, letting her hand drift down to her phone, resting on a low shelf beneath the counter. With a discreet tap of her thumb, she woke the screen, opened the camera, and pressed record, angling the phone just enough to capture the scene. From the far end of the lobby, near a monolithic concrete pillar, Rowan Pierce paused his work. The damp cloth in his hand stopped its rhythmic circular motion on the glass panel he was polishing. The faint, clean scent of his cleaning solution was overpowered by the stench of injustice emanating from the front desk. His gray janitor's uniform was designed to make him invisible, a part of the hotel's minimalist, impersonal aesthetic. Most days, he was grateful for the anonymity. It was a quiet place to hide from a life that had grown too loud with grief. But he saw it all. He saw Fletcher's sneer, the ugly curl of his lip that he hid from his guest. He saw Lena's horrified helplessness, and he saw Vivian Crestwell. He saw the way her shoulders were held ramrod straight, a defense against a world that had tried to chip away at her for decades. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, a restless, brilliant fire that no amount of ignorance could ever extinguish. It was a look he knew. He'd seen a version of it in the mirror for 2 years now. The look of someone present in body but absent in spirit, defined not by who they were, but by what they had lost. Fletcher took a step closer to Miss Crestwell, raising his voice as if she were on the other side of a canyon. "I said welcome," he enunciated, his voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was somehow more insulting than his whispers. "Your interpreter is late." Miss Crestwell's eyes narrowed. She gave a short, sharp nod, her patience clearly worn to a thread. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek tablet, her fingers flying across the screen to type a message. Before she could turn it around, Fletcher waved his hand dismissively. No, we don't have time for that," he said to Lena, rolling his eyes. "Just give her the key to the penthouse and hope for the best." That was it. That was the line. The casual, complete erasure of a person's dignity. For Rowan, it was like a switch being flipped. The quiet, gray world he had built around himself suddenly flooded with color, with a hot, righteous anger he hadn't felt since the day the world went silent for him, too. He thought of his wife, Anya, and how she would have met this kind of petty tyranny with a blazing fury. He thought of his daughter, Hazel, and the world he was trying to build for her, a world where kindness mattered more than status. He set his cleaning cloth and spray bottle carefully on his cart. The soft clink of plastic on metal was the only sound he made as he began to walk. His worn work boots were silent on the polished concrete floor. He didn't know his feet were moving until he was halfway across the lobby, his path closing the distance between the shadows and the spotlight of the front desk. Fletcher turned at the movement, his face pinching with annoyance. "Mr. Pierce, this area doesn't concern maintenance. Go back to your duties." Rowan didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on Vivian Crestwell. He saw the flicker of surprise in her gaze as this man in a janitor's uniform approached her directly, without fear or false deference. He stopped a respectful few feet away, ignoring Fletcher's indignant sputtering. He ignored the eyes of the other staff. He ignored everything but the woman in front of him. He took a breath. Then he lifted his hands. They were calloused hands, hands that knew the familiar shapes of a mop handle and a wrench. But now they moved with a different kind of knowledge. Hesitant for a fraction of a second, then finding a rhythm he thought he had buried forever, they came alive. The movements were clean, sharp, and full of a grace that was breathtakingly out of place in the cold lobby. In the silent, expressive poetry of American Sign Language, his hands began to speak. "Welcome to the Ethelred, Ms. Crestwell. My name is Rowan." The flow of air in the lobby seemed to stop. Lena's phone, still recording, captured the moment perfectly. Fletcher's jaw hung open, a mask of pure, slack-jawed disbelief. Rowan's hands continued, his expression earnest, his eyes holding hers. "Please forgive the ignorance you've been shown. How can I truly help you?" Vivian Crestwell stood frozen for a beat, her own hand still clutching her tablet. Her gaze, which had been a shield of hardened steel just moments before, now softened. The shock was there, plain to see, but it was followed by something else, something deeper. It was the dawning, soul-shaking recognition of being truly and completely seen. The mask of the powerful, untouchable CEO dissolved, and for a fleeting instant, Rowan saw the woman beneath. A woman who had endured a lifetime of being treated like a problem to be solved. Her eyes, clear and startlingly direct, remained locked on his. She didn't move. She didn't type. She just looked at him, and in that profound, unbroken silence, a question hung in the air, louder than any spoken word. "Who are you?" The silence in the lobby stretched, thin and tight, ready to snap. Mr. Fletcher's face, moments ago a mask of smug superiority, was now a canvas of blotchy red and white. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking from Rowan's steady hands to Vivian Crestwell's unblinking stare. For the first time all day, the manager seemed to understand he had lost control of the room. Vivian's gaze did not leave Rowan's. After a long moment that felt like an eternity, her own hands, elegant and sure, lifted from her sides. The movement was economical, precise, and held an authority that Fletcher's blustering could never achieve. "You have," she signed, her expression unyielding. Her eyes then cut to Fletcher, and her hands moved again, this time with a sharp, dismissive finality. "Tell him his services are no longer required. You will assist me." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Rowan swallowed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He turned his head slightly toward the manager. "Ms. Crestwell would like me to assist her from this point on," he said, his voice quiet but firm, a strange echo after so much silence. Fletcher's eyes bulged. "You are a janitor," he hissed, his voice a choked whisper. "You will do no such thing. You are fired, Pierce. Get your things and get out." Vivian stepped forward, placing herself subtly between Rowan and the sputtering manager. She held up one hand, a clear sign for Fletcher to stop. Then she looked at Rowan, her eyebrows raised in a silent question, waiting for him to translate her will. "She said," Rowan relayed, feeling a strange, unfamiliar power settle over him, "that if I am fired, she will be checking out, and the Ethelred's parent company can expect a call from her legal team before breakfast." The threat, delivered so calmly by the man in the gray uniform, landed like a physical blow. Fletcher recoiled, his face paling. He looked from the immovable CEO to the janitor who had suddenly become her voice, her protector. Defeated, he gave a jerky, resentful nod and spun on his heel, stalking toward his office without another word. The power dynamic in the lobby had been irrevocably broken and remade. Vivian watched him go, then turned her attention back to Rowan. "The penthouse key," she signed. "And my luggage." Rowan nodded to Lena, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, astonished eyes. She scrambled to retrieve the key card, her hands trembling as she handed it to Rowan, not Vivian. It was a small, telling gesture. In the span of 2 minutes, the entire hotel hierarchy had been upended. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Rowan stood a respectful distance from Vivian, the luggage cart beside him. The mirrored walls reflected their images back, the titan of industry in her impeccable coat and the janitor in his worn, faded uniform. On the surface, they were from different worlds, but in the quiet hum of the elevator, Rowan felt a strange kinship with this woman. They were both fluent in a language the world refused to learn. The penthouse was breathtaking. It was less a hotel room and more a sterile palace of glass, chrome, and white leather, with a 2-story wall of windows offering a godlike view of the city below. It was impressive, but it was cold. A beautiful, empty box. Rowan set the luggage down by the door. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" he asked, his voice returning to its usual quiet register. Vivienne had walked to the center of the room. She turned to face him, and her hands began to move again, this time without the hard defensive edge they'd had in the lobby. The signs were softer, more inquisitive. "Where did you learn?" The question was simple, but the answer was a story Rowan had not told anyone in 2 years. He hesitated, the old pain rising in his chest like a tide. I used to be a speech therapist," he said aloud, then, remembering, began to sign as he spoke, his movements a little rusty. "I worked with deaf children." Her eyes searched his face, sensing the history behind the words. "You were good at it. Your signing is clear. It has heart." The compliment hit him harder than any insult could have. Heart was something he thought he'd lost. He looked away, toward the vast, unblinking windows. "My wife, Anya, she loved the language. She said it was like watching thoughts take flight." He swallowed, the memory raw. "She died 2 years ago, a car accident." He didn't need to say more. He didn't need to explain that the accident happened right outside his clinic, that the sound of the sirens had become tangled up with the memory of his wife's smile. He didn't need to explain how, after that, the thought of fixing anyone's ability to communicate felt like a profound and terrible lie. How could he teach a child to speak when his own world had been rendered silent? Vivienne said nothing for a long moment. She didn't offer pity or platitudes. She simply watched him, her gaze filled with a deep, solemn understanding. Then she signed. "People see me, and they see a fortress. They assume the silence is by design, a strategy." She paused, her hands still for a moment. "They don't understand that the fortress was built because the world is loud with its disrespect. What your manager did, it was not new to me." Her fingers moved with a bitter precision. "But what you did, that was." She held his gaze, and in her eyes, he saw a loneliness that mirrored his own. The loneliness of being fundamentally misunderstood. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Rowan said quietly. "I am not," she signed, a flicker of something new in her expression. "If I hadn't, I would never have met you, Rowan Pierce." He spent another hour with her, making sure she was settled, using the hotel's app to order her a meal, communicating with the kitchen staff on her behalf. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with the scent of bleach or the squeak of a clean floor. When he finally left the penthouse and returned to the staff levels of the hotel, his mind was reeling. He felt exposed, raw, but also lighter. He was walking down a quiet service corridor toward the break room when a voice called his name. "Rowan!" He turned. It was Lena, the young concierge from the front desk. She hurried toward him, her face alight with a mixture of awe and conspiratorial excitement. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen," she whispered, her eyes wide. "The way you just stood up to him." For her, Rowan just shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone should have." "No," she insisted, stepping closer. "No one ever does, especially not to Fletcher. He's a snake." She bit her lip, then pulled out her phone. "Look, I don't know if this is a good idea, but I couldn't just stand there. He can't get away with it." She pressed play. The screen showed a close-up of Mr. Fletcher's face, twisted in that ugly, smiling sneer. And then his voice, clear and damning, filled the quiet hallway. "It's not like she can complain about the service. All that power and she can't even speak. What a waste." Rowan felt the blood drain from his face. Hearing the words spoken so plainly was infinitely worse than just seeing the act. Lena looked up at him, her expression serious. "I'm sending this to you," she said, her thumbs tapping on the screen. A moment later, his own phone buzzed in his pocket. "He's going to try to get you fired. He's already telling people you were insubordinate. You need this. You have to use it." She gave him a final, encouraging nod and hurried away before he could protest. Rowan stood alone in the hallway, the faint hum of the building's ventilation system filling the silence. He pulled out his phone and watched the short, vile clip again. He saw Fletcher's cruelty. He saw Vivian's proud, lonely stillness. And he saw himself, a man who had spent 2 years running from the world, now holding a weapon he never asked for, facing a fight he wasn't sure he was strong enough to win. The toxic words from the phone's tiny speaker echoed in the sterile hallway, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity Rowan had just witnessed in the penthouse. His first, gut-wrenching impulse was to delete the video, to erase the proof, throw the phone in the river, and retreat back into the comfortable gray numbness he had inhabited for 2 years. His job was simple: be invisible, clean up messes, go home to his daughter. This was a mess he couldn't just wipe away with a mop. This was a stain on a person's soul. Losing his job would be catastrophic. It wasn't a career, but it was stability. It was the health insurance Hazel needed. It was the rent for their small, safe apartment. It was everything he had managed to hold together after everything else fell apart. Fletcher would crush him without a second thought, using the full weight of the corporate machine to do it. He leaned his head back against the cool concrete wall, the phone heavy in his hand. He could almost hear Anya's voice, clear as a bell in his memory. "You don't stand by when someone's being bullied, Rowan. Not ever. Your silence becomes an accomplice." She had lived by that code, fiercely and without apology. Had he forgotten? His phone buzzed again, but this time it was his daily alarm, reminding him his shift was over. It was time to go home. Time to go to Hazel. Meanwhile, on the hotel's executive floor, Mr. Fletcher was staring at his own screen, his fingers flying across the keyboard with furious precision. He was crafting an email to the regional head of human resources, copying the hotel's general manager. Every word was a carefully chosen weapon designed to neutralize the threat Rowan Pierce represented. Subject: urgent. Employee misconduct and guest interaction protocol violation. To whom it may concern, I am writing to file a formal report regarding a deeply concerning incident involving a member of the janitorial staff, Rowan Pierce. This evening, Mr. Pierce aggressively overstepped his duties and inserted himself into a sensitive check-in process with a high-profile guest, Ms. Vivian Crestwell. Disregarding direct orders to stand down, he approached the guest and engaged with her in a manner that was both insubordinate and highly unprofessional. His erratic behavior created a tense and hostile environment for both staff and the guest. I was forced to de-escalate a situation that he single-handedly created. I have concerns about his stability and recommend his immediate suspension pending a full investigation to protect the integrity of the Ethelred brand and ensure guest safety. He read it over, a smug satisfaction settling over him. It was his word, the word of a senior manager, against that of a janitor. There was no contest. He clicked send and leaned back in his leather chair, the feeling of control slowly returning. The door to Rowan's apartment opened with a familiar, comforting creak. The air inside smelled of cinnamon and old books, a world away from Ethelred's chemical sterility. On the fridge, a gallery of Hazel's drawings was held up by mismatched magnets. A crayon drawing of a smiling sun with stick-figure legs was titled Daddy. "Dad?" a small voice called from the living room. He found his 8-year-old daughter curled up on the sofa under a worn quilt, a book resting on her lap. Her dark hair was a messy halo around her face, and her eyes, the same deep brown as her mother's, lit up when she saw him. She sat up, her hands moving in the fluid, natural signs that were their first language. "You're late. Is everything okay?" Rowan forced a smile, setting his worn backpack down. "Everything's fine, sweet pea. Just a busy night." He sat beside her, the sofa groaning in protest. Hazel studied his face, her gaze far too perceptive. "You look sad, the kind of sad you get when you think about Mom." The observation landed with pinpoint accuracy. He didn't know how to respond, so he just reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "Did something bad happen at work?" she signed, her small hands moving with a worried intensity. He wanted to lie, to tell her it was nothing, but looking into her eyes, he couldn't. He owed her the truth, or at least a version of it. "Sometimes," he signed slowly, choosing his words with the care of a therapist, a role he hadn't played in years. "Sometimes people are unkind to others because they are different, and it's hard to know what to do." "You help them," Hazel signed back instantly, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. "Like you used to. You helped kids find their voice." "It's not that simple anymore, Hazel." "Why?" "Because he was scared. Because he was tired. Because the last time he tried to help someone, the world had crashed down around him, taking Anya with it. The memory was a ghost that lived in his bones." Seeing the shadow pass over his face, Hazel did what she always did. She set her book aside, crawled into his lap, and wrapped her small arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. She didn't say anything more. She just held him. In that simple, profound embrace, Rowan felt his resolve hardening. This was what he was protecting, this warmth, this goodness. He couldn't be the man Anya would have wanted if he ran from this. He couldn't be the father Hazel deserved if he let cruelty win because he was afraid. He held her for a long time. Later, after he tucked her into bed and read her a chapter of her book, he sat alone at his small kitchen table, the silence of the apartment a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the video file Lena had sent him. Just as he was about to open it, the phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was a name he didn't recognize. From an address at https://google.com search qrcrestwellventures.com. His heart leaped into his throat. Subject: urgent meeting request from the office of Vivian Crestwell. Mr. Pierce, this message is to confirm that Ms. Vivian Crestwell has requested your presence for a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. The meeting will take place at her company's temporary offices at 1400 Bay Street, Suite 5000. A car will be waiting for you outside your residence at 9:30 a.m. to provide transportation. Please consider this matter to be of the utmost importance. Regards, Nathan Riley, Executive Assistant to the CEO, Crestwell Ventures. Rowan read the email 3 times. A car. An office suite that was likely bigger than his entire apartment building. This was real. He was being summoned. Fletcher had made his move, and now Vivian Crestwell was making hers, pulling him from the shadows of the service corridors and into the glaring light of her world. There was no turning back now. He took a deep breath, his decision finally made. He opened his phone's gallery but didn't play the video. Instead, He found the photo he used as his lock screen. It was of Anya and a much younger Hazel, sitting on a park bench, laughing in the summer sun. He looked at his wife's radiant smile, a smile that had always dared the world to be better. With a newfound firmness in his fingers, he located the video file from Lena. He didn't delete it. He tapped the options icon and saved a copy to his secure cloud drive. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a witness, and he was going to that meeting. The morning light that streamed into Rowan's small apartment felt different today. It wasn't the usual soft glow that promised a quiet day with Hazel. It felt like a spotlight. He stood in front of his closet, which contained a modest collection of work uniforms, worn jeans, and a few plaid shirts. He didn't own a suit. He hadn't had a reason to wear one in years. The man who had needed suits, the confident, articulate speech therapist, felt like a stranger from another lifetime. He finally settled on his best option, a pair of dark gray trousers, clean and pressed, and a plain, light blue button-down shirt that Anya had once said matched his eyes. As he buttoned it, his hands felt clumsy. He felt like he was putting on a costume for a play he hadn't rehearsed, for a role he didn't want. What did a billionaire CEO want with a janitor? Was this a formal thank you? A quiet payoff to ensure his silence? Or was it an interrogation? He was walking into the lion's den, and he didn't even know what kind of beast awaited him. At precisely 9:30 a.m., a sleek black sedan, so polished it seemed to absorb the light around it, pulled up to the curb in front of his modest apartment building. It looked as out of place as a spaceship. Rowan said goodbye to Hazel, who was being watched by their kind, elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "Be brave, Dad." Hazel had signed to him, her small face serious as he was about to leave. The simple command echoed in his head as he walked toward the car. The driver, a stoic man in a black suit, opened the back door for him without a word. Sliding onto the cool leather seat was like stepping across a border into another country. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing him off from his world and plunging him into the silent, air-conditioned luxury of hers. As the car pulled away, Rowan watched his own neighborhood slide past the tinted window. The familiar corner store, the playground, the bus stop, all of it looking distant, like a life he was viewing from afar. The drive downtown was a journey from the city's heart to its glittering steel and glass brain. The car came to a stop before a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds, its facade a dizzying grid of reflective windows. Crestwell Ventures was emblazoned in discreet silver letters above the massive glass doors. Walking into the lobby was like walking into the future. The space was immense, a cathedral of white marble and dark wood, with a digital art installation murmuring on a wall the size of a movie screen. A receptionist, who looked more like a model, eyed him with polite disinterest as he approached. "Good morning," Rowan said, his voice feeling small in the cavernous space. "I'm Rowan Pierce. I have a 10 a.m. meeting with Ms. Crestwell." The receptionist's fingers danced across a keyboard. "I'm sorry, I don't have a Pierce on the schedule." Rowan's heart sank. Of course, it was a mistake, a cruel joke. "Could you check again?" he asked. It might be under her personal appointments. The receptionist sighed, a barely audible huff of annoyance. She typed again, and then her posture changed. Her back straightened, her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mr. Pierce, my apologies. Right this way. I'll escort you to the executive elevator." The change was instantaneous. He had gone from being an invisible annoyance to a person of importance simply because his name had appeared on the right list. The short walk across the marble floor felt like a mile, his sensible work shoes a stark contrast to the sharp clicking of the receptionist's heels. He was led to the 50th floor. The elevator doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into a serene, minimalist reception area where another assistant was waiting. This was Nathan Riley, the man from the email. He was young, sharp, and wore a suit that probably cost more than Rowan's monthly rent. "Mr. Pierce, thank you for coming," Nathan said, his handshake firm and brief. Miss Crestwell will see you now. He led Rowan into a conference room that seemed to be floating in the sky. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a stunning, vertiginous panorama of the city. A long, dark wood table sat in the center, so polished it reflected the clouds. Vivienne Crestwell was seated at the head of the table. She wasn't wearing the charcoal coat from the night before, but a simple, elegant black dress. Her presence dominated the room. She was not the beleaguered guest from the hotel lobby. She was the queen on her throne. Seated to her right was a woman in a severe gray suit with a notepad, and to her left was a man who could only be a lawyer. He had the weary, predatory stillness of a patient shark. Vivienne met Rowan's eyes and gave a slight nod. A different woman, the one in the gray suit, spoke. "Mr. Pierce, I am Catherine, Ms. Crestwell's interpreter. Please, have a seat." Rowan sat, feeling impossibly small in the large leather chair. Vivienne's hands began to move, and Catherine's voice followed a seamless half-second later. "Thank you for being here on such short notice. I wanted to speak with you about the events of last night." "Of course," Rowan managed. "Please," Vivienne continued, her signs sharp and direct. "Tell us exactly what you witnessed, from the beginning." Rowan took a breath. He looked at Vivienne, then at the lawyer, then at the interpreter. He started to speak, his voice hesitant at first. He described the check-in, Mr. Fletcher's behavior, the words he had whispered to Lena. He tried to be objective, to stick to the facts, but he couldn't keep the tremor of disgust out of his voice when he recounted the manager's cruel remarks. He didn't embellish. He didn't have to. The truth was ugly enough on its own. He explained his own intervention simply. "I couldn't stand by and watch that happen," he finished quietly. When he was done, the room was silent except for the faint whisper of the air conditioning. The lawyer hadn't moved a muscle. Vivienne watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she signed again. "We appreciate your candor, Mr. Pierce," the interpreter relayed. The lawyer, on cue, slid a tablet across the table toward Rowan. He looked down and saw a familiar email heading. The complaint Fletcher had sent to HR. "As you can see," the lawyer said, his voice smooth and detached, "Mr. Fletcher has also provided his version of events. In his report, he claims you exhibited erratic and aggressive behavior, that you disregarded direct orders, and created a hostile environment. He is recommending your immediate termination." Rowan felt the blood rush to his head. He stared at the words on the screen. The lies, the complete and total inversion of the truth. It was one thing to expect it, another to see it in cold corporate text. He looked up from the tablet, his gaze moving from the lawyer to Vivienne. This was it. This was the test. They were showing him the official narrative, the story the hotel wanted to believe. He felt the weight of the video on his phone, a silent bomb in his pocket. They were all watching him, their faces impassive, waiting for his reaction. Vivienne leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes intense. She lifted her hands, and the interpreter gave voice to her final, piercing question. "So, Mr. Pierce, that is his truth. What is yours?" The question hung in the air, vast and silent as the cityscape outside the windows. "That is his truth. What is yours?" Rowan's heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He felt the eyes of the lawyer on him, cold and assessing. He felt the quiet professionalism of the interpreter. But he looked only at Vivienne. He saw past the CEO, past the power, and saw the woman from the lobby, the woman who had been so casually and cruelly dismissed. His fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. He pushed the tablet with Fletcher's lies back toward the center of the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "My truth," he said, his voice even, "is what I told you. My truth is that Mr. Fletcher saw a guest he thought he could mock without consequence. He saw a person, not a CEO." As he spoke, his hands instinctively began to move, signing the words, not for the interpreter, but for Vivienne. It felt more honest, more direct. His truth, he continued, his signs becoming more fluid as he settled into the language of his heart, is the story of a man trying to hide his own ugliness. It's the kind of story people in power write to protect themselves. A flicker of something, admiration perhaps, crossed Vivian's face. The lawyer remained impassive, but he shifted slightly in his chair. Vivian's hands moved, her signs sharp and pragmatic. "It is his word against yours," Catherine translated. "He is a senior manager with a long, and I'm quoting from his file, unblemished record. You, by your own admission, are a janitor. In the world we are in right now, Mr. Pierce, truth is often weighed by position, not by character. How do you intend to prove your version of events?" This was the moment, the precipice. She was challenging him, testing him. She wanted to see if the quiet man who had shown such unexpected decency also possessed the strength to fight. Rowan held her gaze. "I had hoped it wouldn't come to this," he said, his voice low. "I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. I believe the right thing should matter." He took a slow breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He placed it gently on the polished, dark wood of the table. The simple, slightly scuffed plastic casing looked like an alien artifact in the room's pristine environment. "I believe truth should be weighed by evidence," he said softly, "not by job titles." He tapped the screen. He didn't need to turn up the volume. In the tomb-like silence of the conference room, Fletcher's voice was grotesquely clear, a tinny, poisonous whisper from the phone's speaker. "Just keep smiling, Lena. It's not like she can complain about the service." The lawyer's pen, which had been still, began to move, scratching quiet notes on his legal pad. Catherine, the interpreter, lowered her eyes, her professional mask unbreachable, yet a faint flush crept up her neck. All that power and she can't even speak. What a waste. The video ended. Rowan let the silence hang for a moment before turning the screen off. He looked at Vivian. Her face was a mask of cold fury. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of someone surprised. It was the ancient, frozen rage of a woman who had just been handed absolute proof of a reality she had been forced to endure her entire life. This was not just an insult against her. It was a validation of every slight, every moment of condescension, every time she had been treated as less than whole. The lawyer cleared his throat, his demeanor shifting entirely. The predatory stillness was gone, replaced by the brisk efficiency of a man who had just been handed a winning hand. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," he said, his tone now bordering on warm. "This changes the landscape considerably. You were wise to preserve this." Rowan simply nodded, his work done. He expected them to take the phone, to log it as evidence, to tell him he would be contacted later. He expected to be dismissed, but Vivian held up a hand, stopping the lawyer before he could speak further. She looked at Rowan, and her signs were swift and decisive. "Sending this to Human Resources is not enough," Catherine relayed, her voice crisp. "Firing one man does not fix the disease. Mr. Fletcher is not an anomaly. He is a symptom." He felt comfortable saying those things because the system he works in has taught him there are no consequences for disrespecting people he perceives as lesser. Not just the disabled, but the staff, the invisible people like the concierge and the janitor. Rowan watched, mesmerized, as she laid out her strategy. This was no longer just about one man's job or one manager's cruelty. This was a war against a culture. "I will not be canceling my contract with the Ethelred's parent company," she continued, her hands moving with the sharp precision of a surgeon. "I will be leveraging it. I'm calling a meeting with their entire executive board for tomorrow afternoon. The CEO, the COO, the head of HR, all of them." The lawyer nodded slowly, already seeing the power of the move. "Mr. Fletcher will be in that meeting," she went on. "He will be asked to give his report on the insubordinate janitor. And you, Mr. Pierce, you will be there as well." Rowan's head snapped up. "Me? In the meeting?" "You," Vivian confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "You will not be there as a janitor or as a witness. You will be there as my personal consultant on this matter. You will be there as the living example of the integrity they claim their brand represents." He was speechless. He had come here this morning terrified of losing his job, and now he was being cast as a central player in a corporate drama of epic proportions. He was being asked to walk even deeper into the lion's den, this time to help lead the hunt. Vivienne saw the shock and hesitation on his face. She leaned forward, her expression softening for the first time, becoming personal. She signed directly to him, and Catherine's voice was almost a whisper. "Fletcher's words were an insult to me. But the culture that allows a man like him to thrive is an insult to everyone. It's an insult to the young woman at the desk, and it is an insult to a good man who has to mop floors to care for his daughter." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Then, for the first time, she used his name. "Will you help me teach them a lesson in respect, Rowan?" The use of his name, signed with such deliberate intent, was more powerful than any job offer or legal strategy. It was an invitation, an appeal, a sign that she saw him not as a tool or a pawn, but as an ally. The question, signed with such deliberate personal weight, landed not in Rowan's ears, but in his soul. He looked at the powerful woman before him, a woman who could buy and sell entire city blocks, but who had to ask a janitor for help in a fight for basic dignity. He thought of Anya, who never backed down from a righteous fight. He thought of Hazel, and the kind of world he wanted her to inherit. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but for the first time, it was smaller than his resolve. He met Vivienne's gaze and lifted his own hands. They felt steady now. "Yes," he signed, the single word clear and unequivocal. He then added, speaking aloud for the benefit of the others in the room, his voice filled with a quiet conviction, "Yes, I'll help you." A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched Vivienne Crestwell's lips. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face, melting the icy facade and revealing a glimpse of the woman beneath. She gave a single, sharp nod. The alliance was forged. The room immediately shifted into a new gear. The lawyer, whose name Rowan learned was Alistair, began speaking in rapid, low tones to Nathan, the assistant. "Get me the full corporate charter for the Ethelred's parent company. I want their board members' bios and any pending litigation from the last 5 years. Nathan, cancel Ms. Crestwell's afternoon appointments and draft a formal request for the meeting. Cite breach of hospitality standards and potential brand damages. We want their CEO, their board chair, and Fletcher in that room. No substitutes." Nathan was already tapping away on his tablet, his face a mask of efficiency. "Time and place?" "Here," Vivienne signed, gesturing around the vast conference room. "My territory. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. She then turned her attention back to Rowan. "You will not go to your shift tonight, Rowan," Catherine translated. "Nathan will contact the hotel and inform them you are on paid leave, pending a corporate review. He is now your point of contact. You will have his direct number." It was happening so fast. In the space of 5 minutes, he had been deputized, given a handler, and placed on leave from a job he wasn't even sure he still had. He was no longer just Rowan Pierce, janitor. He was Rowan Pierce, consultant. It felt absurd. The long ride home in the silent black car was surreal. Rowan stared out the window, watching the opulent storefronts of downtown give way to the familiar, grittier landscape of his own neighborhood. His mind was a whirlwind. Just yesterday, his biggest worry had been a leaky faucet in his bathroom and whether Hazel would eat her vegetables. Now, he was a key player in a corporate showdown, allied with a silent billionaire against a system that was designed to crush people like him. He felt like a man who had been swept out to sea by a rogue wave and was only now realizing he was learning how to swim. Back at the Ethelred, news was already filtering through the staff channels. An all-hands email had gone out from the regional office, announcing a last-minute, mandatory executive meeting at the Crestwell Ventures Tower. No reason was given, but the inclusion of Mr. Fletcher's name on the attendee list was all the staff needed to start whispering. Fletcher himself was preening. He strode through the lobby like a conquering hero, letting everyone believe the meeting was about finalizing the lucrative Crestwell partnership, a deal he had saved by handling a rogue employee. Lena watched him from behind the concierge desk, her stomach twisting into a knot of anxiety. She hadn't heard from Rowan, and she feared the worst. She imagined he had been quietly fired, silenced with a severance check and an NDA, another good person ground down by the machine. Fletcher caught her eye and gave her a smug, conspiratorial wink, as if they were partners in his triumph. Lena had to physically restrain herself from flinching in disgust. When Rowan walked through his front door that evening, the scent of home wrapped around him like a blanket. Hazel ran to him, her face alight with excitement. "Mrs. Gable let me have 2 cookies, and we watched a movie about a talking dog," she signed, her hands a blur of motion. He swept her up into a hug, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the simple, clean scent of kids' shampoo. This was real. This was his anchor in the swirling chaos of the day. "A talking dog, huh?" he said, smiling. "Was he a good dog?" "He was a hero," she signed emphatically. "He saved everyone." Later, as they sat on the floor building a sprawling, illogical castle out of plastic blocks, Hazel looked up at him, her expression serious. "Dad, you still look sad, but different now. Your eyes are louder." Rowan paused, a red block in his hand. Louder eyes. Only a child could come up with something so strange and so perfectly true. "Today," he signed slowly, meeting her gaze, "I decided not to be quiet anymore. I saw someone being unkind, and I decided to help." "Like a hero?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. Rowan felt a lump form in his throat. "I don't know about that, sweet pea. I'm just trying to be a good man. For her. For Anya." After he tucked Hazel into bed, the quiet of the apartment felt different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of anticipation. He found himself drawn to the old wooden chest in the corner of his living room. He opened it and carefully took out a small, framed photograph of Anya. It was from their wedding day. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes sparkling with a light that he had thought was extinguished from the world forever. "Well, Anne," he whispered to the photo, "I think I finally got into the kind of trouble you'd be proud of." He spent the next hour not in fear, but in preparation. He dug out an old dusty textbook from his college days, The Ethics of Communication. He ran his fingers over the pages, the theories and principles coming back to him. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a specialist, an expert in the very thing Fletcher and the hotel had so profoundly failed at, the clear, respectful, and dignified exchange of human thought. He was armed not just with a video, but with knowledge. He stood by his window, looking out at the city. Far in the distance, a cluster of glittering towers pierced the night sky. One of them was the Ethelred. Another was Crestwell Ventures, his 2 worlds. Tomorrow they were set to collide. A wave of terror washed over him, cold and sharp, but he didn't let it pull him under. He thought of Vivienne's final, signed question. He thought of Hazel calling him a hero. Tomorrow, a janitor was going to walk into their boardroom, but he wouldn't be there to clean up their mess. He would be there to show them what it was. The Ethelred executives were already seated around the long, polished table when Rowan walked in. There were 5 of them, 4 men and 1 woman, all exuding the same aura of crisp, expensive tailoring and unassailable authority. They were the picture of corporate power, the kind of people Rowan had only ever seen in magazines or on the news. At the far end of the table sat Mr. Fletcher. He looked confident, even smug, holding a leather-bound portfolio in front of him. But when he saw Rowan enter not through a service door, but alongside Vivienne Crestwell and her legal counsel, his smugness evaporated. A look of pure, bewildered shock washed over his face. Rowan Pierce wasn't supposed to be here. He especially wasn't supposed to be taking a seat at the main table, directly opposite the CEO of the hotel's parent company. The CEO, a man named Alistair Davies, had silver hair and a look of weary patience. He stood to greet Vivian. "Ms. Crestwell, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We were deeply concerned to hear of the misunderstanding during your check-in." His gaze flickered to Rowan for a fraction of a second, a silent dismissal, before returning to Vivian. "I want to assure you we take guest satisfaction very seriously." Vivian gave a curt nod, her expression unreadable. They all sat. The air in the room was thick with tension and the faint, expensive scent of cologne. "We understand," Davies continued, "that our hotel manager, Mr. Fletcher, has already submitted a report on the incident. We'd like to allow him to speak to it directly, to clear the air." He gestured to Fletcher, giving him the floor. Fletcher stood, regaining a measure of his composure. He opened his portfolio and began to speak, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. He recounted the tale he had written in his email, a masterpiece of corporate fiction. He painted Rowan as an unstable, disgruntled employee who had aggressively inserted himself into a delicate situation. He described his own actions as calm, decisive, and focused on de-escalation. He made it sound as if he had single-handedly rescued a vulnerable VIP from the unpredictable behavior of a menial worker. "My sole priority," Fletcher concluded, looking earnestly at Davies, "was the safety and comfort of Miss Crestwell and the protection of the Ethelred's 5-star reputation." Throughout the performance, Rowan remained perfectly still. He followed Vivian's lead, his face a calm, neutral mask. He didn't fidget. He didn't scowl. He simply listened, and his quiet stillness seemed to unnerve Fletcher more than any outburst could have. When Fletcher sat down, looking pleased with himself, Davies turned to Vivian with a conciliatory smile. "Thank you, Don. Ms. Crestwell, on behalf of the entire organization, I apologize for any distress this employee's behavior may have caused. I can assure you the matter is being dealt with. Mr. Pierce's employment is under review, and we will take the strongest possible disciplinary action." Vivian let the silence stretch for a beat. Then her hands moved, Catherine's voice following like a shadow. "Mr. Davies, the only distress I experienced yesterday was caused by your senior management. Mr. Fletcher's account is not only inaccurate, it is a complete fabrication." Davies' smile tightened. "Ms. Crestwell, Don Fletcher has been with us for 12 years. His record is exemplary. While I don't doubt your perception of events, it seems we have a classic case of his word against—" He paused, glancing at Rowan. "The word of a temporary staff member." "Mr. Pierce is not temporary staff," Vivian corrected, her signs sharp. "He is my consultant on this matter, and we do not have to rely on anyone's word." She nodded once to her lawyer. Alistair, the lawyer, leaned forward. "We have evidence to support Ms. Crestwell's account," he said calmly. He reached into his briefcase and produced a small, discreet tablet, connecting it to the large monitor at the end of the room with a single cable. "We would like to play a short video for the board." Fletcher's face went white. He stared at the dark screen, a dawning horror in his eyes. "This is an ambush. You can't—" "Please proceed, Alistair," Vivian signed, cutting him off. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, the lobby of the Ethelred, and Mr. Fletcher's face twisted in that ugly, smiling sneer. His voice, captured with perfect clarity by Lena's phone, filled the silent, horrified boardroom. "It's not like she can complain about the service, all that power and she can't even speak. What a waste." The video played out. The entire board was forced to witness the raw, undisguised contempt. When it ended, the silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Fletcher's ragged, panicked breathing. He was exposed, annihilated. There was no explanation, no excuse. Mr. Davies looked like he had been punched. His face was pale, his corporate composure shattered. He looked at Fletcher with utter disgust, then back at Vivian, his expression now one of dawning panic. He was no longer dealing with a disgruntled employee. He was dealing with a public relations catastrophe and a deeply insulted billionaire. Vivienne let them stew in the silence for a full minute before she began to sign again. "As you can see," Catherine translated, her voice cold and precise, "this was not a misunderstanding. This was an act of deliberate, malicious disrespect. But I am not here today just to discuss the actions of one pathetic man." Her eyes swept across the stunned faces of the board members. "I am here to discuss the culture that made him feel so safe. The culture that would have taken his word without question and discarded the truth because it came from a janitor." She paused, then turned her gaze to Rowan. "Mr. Davies, you wanted to hear a different version of events. I believe my consultant has one to share." "Rowan, please." It was his turn. Rowan stood up slowly. All eyes in the room were on him. He wasn't the janitor anymore. He was the most important person in the room. He felt a lifetime of being invisible fall away. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady and clear. "My name is Rowan Pierce. I'm a father, and I was, for many years, a speech and language therapist." A few of the board members blinked, surprised. "My area of expertise is not just the mechanics of speech, but the foundation of all human interaction, communication. And communication is not about speaking. It is about being heard. It is about dignity." He looked directly at Davies. "What I witnessed yesterday was not a failure of protocol. It was a failure of humanity. Your manager did not see a valued guest. He saw a disability, and in doing so, he devalued not only Ms. Crestwell, but your own brand, your own staff, and the very concept of hospitality you claim to sell." He didn't sound angry. He sounded like a professor delivering a lecture. "You see, a 5-star rating isn't about the thread count of your sheets or the temperature of your champagne. It's about creating an environment where every single person, from the CEO in the penthouse to the young woman at the front desk to the man cleaning the floors, feels seen, respected, and safe. Mr. Fletcher didn't just fail Ms. Crestwell. He failed your entire company. Because the culture he represents, the one that whispers insults when it thinks no one of consequence can hear, is a poison, and it will rot your brand from the inside out." He let his words settle, then sat down. He had spoken the truth, his truth, forged from both professional knowledge and personal pain. The boardroom was silent. The executives stared at him, then at each other, then at the utterly broken form of Mr. Fletcher. They had come here expecting to manage a minor HR issue. Instead, a janitor had dissected the very soul of their corporation and laid it bare on the table. Vivienne finally moved, delivering the killing blow. "Mr. Fletcher's employment is, of course, terminated, effective immediately," she signed. "But that is not my price for remaining a client. My price is change. I am demanding a complete overhaul of your corporate training protocols, focusing on accessibility, disability inclusion, and empathy-based hospitality. This new program will be designed and overseen by an independent consultant." She paused, then looked pointedly, and with a glint of triumph in her eyes, directly at Rowan. "My consultant." The silence that followed Vivienne's declaration was heavy and absolute. The 5 executives on the other side of the table looked at each other, then at the pale, defeated face of Alistair Davies. They had been cornered, outmaneuvered, and utterly dismantled, not by a rival corporation but by their own arrogance, which had been turned against them like a weapon. Davies cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the still room. "Miss Crestwell," he began, his voice strained, "your proposal is unconventional. However, we accept your terms." The capitulation was total. He then turned his gaze, now filled with icy contempt, on Fletcher. "Don, clear out your desk. Security will escort you from the building." Fletcher looked up, his face a mask of disbelief. "Alistair, please." "Get out," Davies snapped. 2 security guards entered the room on a silent cue and flanked Fletcher. leading him away without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Once the remaining executives had offered their hasty assurances and departed, the vast conference room fell quiet. It was just Rowan, Vivian, her lawyer, and her interpreter. "Mr. Pierce," the lawyer said with a rare smile, "in my 25 years of corporate law, I have rarely witnessed such an elegant dismantling of an opponent. You were remarkable." Rowan just shook his head, still feeling dazed. "I just told the truth." Vivian's hands moved, and Catherine's voice was soft, filled with a warmth Rowan hadn't heard before. "You did more than that, Rowan. You gave a voice to my silence. Thank you." She paused, her expression deeply sincere. "Which is why the offer stands. Head of the new Crestwell Ethelred Hospitality Initiative. You will have a staff, a budget, and the full authority of my office to implement real change." She named a salary that made Rowan's ears ring. I can't," he stammered. "Ms. Crestwell, I'm a janitor. I mop floors. You are an expert who has been hiding." She signed back, her conviction absolute. "I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to finally be who you are." The ride home in the silent black car was surreal. Rowan stared out the window, his mind a whirlwind. Just yesterday, his biggest worry had been a leaky faucet. Now he'd been handed a blueprint for a new life. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Lena? Rowan, are you okay? I heard Fletcher was escorted out." "He's gone," Rowan said, a smile spreading across his face. "And it's thanks to you. We did it, Lena. Thank you." When he walked through his front door, Hazel ran to him, her eyes searching his. She saw the change immediately. The sadness that always lingered behind his eyes was gone, replaced by something bright and powerful. He knelt down in front of her, his hands moving with an energy she hadn't seen in years. "Remember I told you I saw someone being unkind?" He signed. She nodded. "Well, today, we made sure he can't be unkind anymore. And the woman he was unkind to, she's asked me to help her, to teach her whole company how to be better listeners." He paused, his heart swelling. "I'm not going to be a janitor anymore, Sweet Pea. I'm going back to doing the work I was meant to do." A huge, radiant smile broke across Hazel's face. She launched herself into his arms, squeezing him with all her might. Her hug was pure, unconditional joy. As he held his daughter, his phone buzzed with the formal written job offer from Crestwell Ventures. He glanced at the screen, at the title and the life-changing numbers, but all he could feel was the warmth of his daughter's embrace. It was the only validation he had ever really needed. He was home. 6 months later, the world was a different place. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the newly opened Crestwell Deaf Community Center, a vibrant space filled with art, laughter, and the beautiful, silent poetry of hands in motion. This was the celebration of the first major project from the Crestwell Ethelred Hospitality Initiative, and at its center stood Rowan, Vivian, and Hazel. Rowan was no longer the man who hid in the shadows. Dressed in a simple, smart blazer, he moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence, greeting families and laughing with children. He saw Lena, the former concierge, now a rising star in hotel management, effortlessly signing with a deaf couple, her face alight with the joy of genuine connection. It was the living proof that his work mattered. Vivian was by his side, not as a formidable CEO, but as a gracious host. The icy fortress she had once inhabited had melted away, replaced by a warmth that seemed to radiate from her. She watched Hazel, who was eagerly teaching a group of children how to sign the names of different animals, and a look of profound peace settled on her features. "You built this, Rowan." She signed to him, her hands moving with the easy familiarity of their daily conversations. "Not the bricks and mortar. This feeling. This community." He shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "I just helped open a door you had already built. You just needed someone to show you where the key was." Hazel ran up to them then, her face beaming. She tugged on both their hands, her eyes darting between them. "You know," she signed, with the seriousness only a child can muster. "You both have the same eyes now." Vivian tilted her head, intrigued. Rowan smiled, asking, "How so, Sweet Pea?" Hazel grinned. "They're both loud." As the event began to wind down, the two of them stood watching Hazel from a quiet corner. The joy in the room was a tangible thing, a testament to their unlikely partnership. "I was powerful, rich, and profoundly lonely," Vivian signed, her gaze soft. "I'm not lonely anymore. I'm happy," Rowan signed back, his heart full. "I didn't think it was possible to feel this way again." As they watched their daughter laugh, Vivian's hand found his, her fingers lacing through his own. It was a simple, quiet gesture that spoke of a shared future, of a home found, and of a peace that was louder than any word. A janitor who had been silenced by grief, a CEO who had never been heard, and a little girl who understood the language of the heart. Together they had learned that the greatest strength is found in the courage to connect. Sometimes the most valuable person in the room is the one no one notices, and sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks not with sound, but with courage. One act of decency, a refusal to let cruelty triumph, didn't just change one man's life. It rebuilt three. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to know. Where are you watching from? Let us know your city or country in the comments below, and tell us which part of the story resonated with you the most. If you believe the world needs more stories of hope, dignity, and the power of human connection, please subscribe and join our community. New stories are on their way. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of your heart and never underestimate the power of a quiet hero.